What makes a screenwriter or director follow their dreams in the first place? That's what I want to find out in one scene. I want to know the movie moments that inspired artists who later found success themselves, and I want to see what I can learn from them. I'm a newer professional screenwriter. On each episode, I'm joined by a subscriber who's an aspiring writer or filmmaker because I want their perspective too. We are about to discover some things that are going to seriously level up our craft, so let's get into it. I am sitting down with Dalan Musson and Reginald Johnson today to talk about screenwriting, and we're going to kick that off by looking at a specific movie and a specific scene that inspired Dalan early on in his own journey. I'm super excited about this, guys. Thank you so much for taking a bit of time to not only have this conversation, but to also help me work through the format for this thing because this is one of the first episodes and I'm still figuring it all out. So I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for that. Dalen, you want to intro the movie that we're watching today and just kind of briefly talk about the first time you saw it?
This movie is Clerks, written and directed by Kevin Smith. The first time I saw it, a friend of mine in high school brought um, what I guess I can admit now the statute of limitations is probably over, a bootleg copy, like written in whiteout marker on the VHS tape itself.
Perfect.
Um, and he brought it over and he looked at me and said, "You have to see this." It is the most old man thing in the world to say stuff like "you had to be there."
No,
But
totally.
there are certain iconic moments, I think, in everybody's lives and everybody's whatever, that an event happens and it is such a seismic shift. Now, this is very, very personal, of course. This isn't a large, like JFK getting assassinated moment where everybody knows exactly where they were. But it just changed. There was everything that came before X and everything that came after, right? There are movies like Star Wars, there are movies like Pulp Fiction, where it just, when you were there, you were like, this is very different. And this was one of those moments for me.
That's awesome. I got to rewatch it over the weekend for probably the first time in like 15 years. It's been a while, and probably my third or fourth time ever. So it was super fun to have an excuse to revisit it. Reggie, you said you'd never actually seen it in its entirety before this, which is super interesting. Because like I think, some of the things that make it so groundbreaking today probably don't stand out in the same way because it influenced so many of the things that came after it. And also because there's just like a barrier to making low budget films that existed back then that it's just so different now. So like I'm actually very curious, like honest answer, what do you think of it?
I think I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like anytime, if when you study film, you go back and watch, let's say you watch Citizen Kane for the first time, you're like, oh, so this is where all that came from. Or, you watch Chinatown, like, oh, okay, so this was the first one to do this thing that 30 years of movies have copied ever since. So you definitely see that. It's like, going back in time and seeing, although I was definitely alive then. True
Totally.
story. My Kevin Smith journey started with Mallrats.
That's
Um,
awesome.
It's interesting that you mention Citizen Kane because I think, like, I use this very often, right? Is like the Barsoom series, which was ended up being John Carter, like John Carter of Mars and Princess of Mars and all that. I remember when that John Carter movie came out, everyone was saying, everyone in my circle was like, "Oh, it just feels like all these other movies we've seen." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's because every single movie grew from that. This is 65 years before Star Wars. Like, it affected everything. And so now when we see it on screen, it just feels like it's biting all those other things. And I think some of those ultra classic movies, when you go back, like when you trace that lineage and you go back and you watch, I mean, Citizen Kane being the most obvious and prescient example here. It really is. Everything comes out of that. So it feels, when you watch it in reverse, it feels a little bit, it feels like the derivative, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Fascinating.
It is funny how it works. Like I don't know if you guys saw. I'm sure you did, Dalen, because you kind of keep up on all that. But I don't know if you saw the new Fantastic Four. I went and saw that in theaters, and
I'm familiar.
yeah. So I mean, I thought like objectively, probably in the top 25% of like Marvel releases, like just a really really well made film. But like it didn't stand out in the way that it would have stood out if it came out 20 years ago. Because like so many of we just have this familiarity with all
Yeah.
those things, and it's very 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 different. Um, so I don't know. I find that stuff very interesting. Well, real quick before we dive in, let me give everyone an idea of who you both are. So Reggie is an up and coming writer director who often works in the action and fantasy and sci-fi spaces. I can attest he's a really good writer because we featured a page of his on Spot the Pro episode 5 of last year, and I read some of the script that followed. He's also a musician, a martial artist, a fight choreographer, so lots of cool experience there. Dalan is a former indie professional wrestler, an RPG enthusiast, and a dog rescuer. And his credits include Captain America: Brave New World, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Iron Sky 2. But you've been doing it much longer than that.
You had to throw that one in there, huh?
Well, why not, man? I mean, like that's the last time we talked on camera, you said flat out that that was like the coolest experience that you'd ever had, and it was a major highlight of your career. So
It was. I shouldn't joke because the director will watch this and be like, "What'd I do?" Um, no, they're all, all your babies are important.
totally. Yeah, it's I mean it's kind of like so like I have the poster for Aftermath on the wall there, and it came out very different than what I expected it would
As
be.
well, you should.
But I had the coolest experiences being part of that movie, and it was
Yeah.
amazing. So
Hey,
how can you
man,
not be
it
proud of that?
rarefied air.
Yeah, man, it's cool.
Seriously.
But anyway, so you've been doing this a lot longer than that, and you said that even though Clerks is not the type of movie that you're known for, you can basically trace your writing journey back to this movie, which I think is super cool, and especially because Reggie and I are both in kind of the action, sci-fi,
Right.
fantasy space a bit ourselves. I'm very curious to see if like we just learn anything from this conversation that rubs off on our own writing.
It
Uh,
is, I think it will in a way that will surprise and delight you.
then I'm excited, man. All right. So the scene in question is when the characters are talking about Star Wars, specifically the Death Star.
Yeah.
Like I said, this one scene series is brand new. I'm still experimenting with the format. Dalen had a very strong opinion, which we'll talk about later, that we should watch the scene instead of reading the script out loud.
Mhm.
So we're going to do that. And I'm going to edit bits of the scene into this video as we watch and talk about it. You guys should both feel free to stop and pause as I'm playing. That'll make it more interesting and hopefully avoid copyright infringement. But to everybody watching, if all you see on screen is a script as we're talking about it or whatever, that's because YouTube didn't like the video or the clip at all, and I was forced to upload another version. So we'll see what happens. It's all an experiment.
Thanks. You know that article's accurate? Caitlin really is getting married.
You know what I just watched?
Me pulling a can off some moron's fist?
Return of the Jedi.
Didn't you hear me? Caitlin is really getting married.
What did you like better, Jedi or The Empire Strikes Back?
Empire.
Blasphemy.
Empire
It
had
is
the better
blasphemy.
ending. I mean, Luke gets his hand cut off, finds out Vader's his father,
I'm
a
a
hand
fight
gets
you.
frozen, taken away by Boba Fett. It ends on such a down note. I mean, that's what life is, a series of down endings. All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets.
There was something else going on in Jedi. I never noticed it till today. They built another Death Star, right?
Yeah.
Now, the first one was completed and fully operational before the Rebels destroyed it.
Luke blew it up. Give credit where credit's due.
And the second one was still being built when they blew it up.
Compliments of Lando Calrissian.
Something just never sat right with me that second time around. I could never put my finger on it, but something just wasn't right.
And you figured it out.
The first Death Star was manned by the Imperial Army. The only people on board were stormtroopers, dignitaries, Imperials.
Basically.
So when they blew it up, no problem. Evil's punished.
And the second time around?
The second time around, it wasn't even done being built yet. It was still under construction.
So?
So a construction job of that magnitude would require a hell of a lot more manpower than the Imperial Army had to offer. I bet they brought independent contractors in on that thing. Plumbers, aluminum siders, roofers.
Not just Imperials, is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. In order to get it built quickly and quietly, they'd hire anybody that can do the job. Think the average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet main? All they know is killing in white uniforms.
All right, so they bring in independent contractors. Why are you so upset at its destruction?
You know what,
All those
I just
innocent
want to pause it real
contractors
quick.
brought
I'm
in
going
the
to call out something in case I forget to talk about it later. But
Mm.
I think like what that does so well is it takes like an experience that basically everybody watching this movie has had, which is seeing these movies, right? And it just like and it just dives into a detail that you've never really thought about before, and it gets so detailed about it, like really just talking about like the plumbers not being able to install water main, or like all right, like that's and that is such a cool example of great writing. And I still to this day find that I really love movies that do that about something like do the same thing, like take something very everyday and find a completely new perspective. And even if nothing else about that movie stands out to me, like I will always remember that scene because it's just such a cool thing. So,
You say great writing. I think it's fascinating conceptually,
okay.
but I do believe those two things maybe live down the street from each other in certain circumstances. Um, One of the most scathing critiques of someone else's work I ever heard. This was not me giving it, and I wish it was, but I have used this line many, many times since. Um, is have you ever heard a human being say those words in that order? And
That's such an interesting thing to say because it immediately makes me wonder what the tone of the thing that they were critiquing was, right? Because like dialogue depends so much on tone and intent.
does it?
Totally. Like so like take screwball comedies from like the 50s or whatever, right? Like there's all sorts of lines in those movies where nobody has ever said those words in that order before, but they work beautifully for those movies because of the tone.
Sure. I mean,
But
yeah, a
go,
lot of
Richard.
fantasy movies, the dialogue is at face value is very stilted, but given the context and the actor's delivery, it sort of lives in its own space that works where it wouldn't work if, let's say, it were in Clerks.
100%. The prithys and forsooths,
Hmm.
absolutely. But I think there is voice, right?
Totally.
Obviously, so much of it has to do with the actors and the delivery. But there is just some stuff I firmly believe that, yes, obviously, dialogue from A Dragon's Tale doesn't belong in Clerks, right? That won't fit. But that dialogue that we're talking about that we can think of that we remember, the dialogue in Lord of the Rings, um, it still sounds like human beings talking or dwarves talking or
100%.
whatever aliens.
Yeah.
What is so fascinating to me about this, and I think we'll get into this at the end of the scene, is this does not sound like human beings talking to me. This sounds like someone writing out something very, very clever. Um, And boy, oh boy, it's funny you stopped it at about the time that I just made the note mouthful, because man, it's a mouthful. Now,
I think that's a really, really good note because I I would walk away from this scene not remembering the mouthful of dialogue and remembering the like how interesting it is conceptually, right?
the concept, that's right.
And that's why I call it great writing because I think even if like the dialogue itself is probably not executed as well as it could be, Kevin Smith's still super early on in his career, whatever. Even if it's a mouthful and that's what you want to say about it. Like I think if you walk away remembering it and it affects you, I don't know how you like it's really hard to achieve that, you know? That's not something that's simple to achieve.
I don't disagree, but again, I would merely, and we can get back to the scene, I merely would separate a great concept from brilliant execution.
Yeah, I like that.
I think those two things, when they come together, are amazing. It's like skill and talent,
Sure.
right? You were born with talent, you're and you learn skill, right?
I like it. Should we dive back in?
Yeah.
Do the job or killed. Casualties of a war they had nothing to do with. Alright, look. You're a roofer. Some juicy government contract comes your way. You got a wife and kids, the two-story in suburbia. This is a government contract, which means all sorts of benefits. Along come these left-wing militants and blast everything within a 3-mile radius with their lasers. You didn't ask for that. You have no personal politics. You're just trying to scrape out a living.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but what are you talking about?
The ending of Return of the Jedi.
My friend here is trying to convince me that any independent contractors who were working on the uncompleted Death Star were innocent victims when it was destroyed by the rebels.
Well, I'm a contractor myself. I'm a roofer. Done and ready home improvements. And speaking as a roofer, I can tell you a roofer's personal politics comes into play heavily when choosing jobs.
Like when?
3 weeks ago, I was offered a job up in the hills. A beautiful house, tons of property, a simple reshingling job. They told me if I could finish it in 1 day, I would double my price. Then I realized whose house it was.
Whose house was it?
Dominic Bambino's.
Babyface Bambino? The gangster?
The same. The money was right, but the risk was too high. I knew who he was, and based on that, I turned the job over to a friend of mine.
Based on personal politics.
Right, and the next week, the Foresi family put a hit on Babyface's house. My friend was shot and killed. Didn't even finish reshingling.
No way.
I'm alive because I knew the risk involved in that particular client. My friend wasn't so lucky. Any contractor working on that Death Star knew the risk involved. If they got killed, it's their own fault. A roofer listens to this, not his wallet.
Cool. Awesome.
I will say this. What are they? It's Jeff Anderson and Brian O'Halloran, I think, are Dante and Randall. They are so charming as not total professional character actors as they might be. They embody those characters so much, and it still delights me just watching them sit there and say this absolute gobbledygook.
Yeah,
It's-
it's
yeah.
really fun. You know what else was really cool there, man, is like, and I would call this great writing again, is like, did you ever read like I think he's sort of in your circle, but Terry Rossio's like word player columns from back in the day.
Mhm.
So he had one about scene character, which I highly recommend everybody check out here. But it was just about like you can have like two writers who write the exact same scene with like perfect dialogue and all this tension and whatever, like, but if one doesn't just have elements that like just add character to it and make it memorable and like just kind of make the world feel lived in, it's still going to feel flat. And like, so like Jay right there, just like shoplifting and stuffing his face with food there as all that's going on is like doing a couple things. Like one is it's just funny and interesting and it's making it feel like the world is bigger than just this conversation. And it's also like just kind of it gives you something to cut to and it creates more tension and you're like, oh, maybe that becomes something later, maybe it doesn't, but it's just I think it's really cool and a decision that not everybody would have made.
I love that you just said creates more tension, referring to the Clerks Death Star scene.
I mean, it adds tension to the scene. I definitely would say that. Like not in like a oh no, like something bad's going to happen, but it just kind of yeah, tension's the word that I would use. Like it
That's
just
fair.
it kind of it puts you just a little bit more on the edge of your seat, paying attention to everything that's going on in this scene, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's an ideological tension. It's he sort of takes it from the world of like, let's say, proto cinema sins to a real world example in a very funny way, which is really clever.
Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking about the scene
Did
that you
you
wanted to talk about.
both go to film school?
I did not go to film school. I actually dropped out of college altogether.
Highly
I went
recommend it.
a school that has a very famous film school within it and hung with film nerds, but I did not myself go to film school.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
took a screenwriting course in community college, which was the thing that ruined my life. So there you go.
What, community college or a film writing course?
The screenwriting course.
No, they have their values.
No, no, no. I just mean like it set my life on a completely different trajectory than it
Mm.
likely would have gone on otherwise. But yeah, man. So talk to us about that scene. Like, why did that have such a huge influence on you?
All right, this is now going to veer off into a total rant, so you guys please interrupt me. And this is where the twist
I could
of,
also
I
just put
think,
my microphone on mute and just let you go, man.
don't recommend it. So I watched this, and this is going to sound corny, but keep in mind I was, what, 15 when this movie came out? I'm dating myself very much. I remember watching that, and I was sitting there with my buddy, and I was like, oh my God, it's me. That's an idealized version of me. I want to be cool and laconic as fuck and hang out and say charming and witty shit. And there is a version, this term did not exist back then, but there's a version that goes very edgelordy. And then there's a version that isn't that, I think, because you're like, I want to be charming and cool and say things and whatever, right? And it felt like me. It felt literally like, oh man, that's me. That's us. That's my crew of comic book and wrestling dorks. And Dan literally said, hey man, we can do that. And I was like, yeah, yeah, we can. And it directly led to us shooting our like first, I hesitate to call it independent or movie, and definitely not both of those put together. But it led to us trying to shoot some stuff in the summer after high school. And I was like, this is awesome. I can write clever shit, and I can write guys talking about the kind of things I think about and I want to say. And exactly what you were saying, Nate, the concepts of these scenes stick with me, right? You can't quote that dialogue. None of it's quotable,
Correct.
but you understand what the concept is, right? And I was like, yes, this is the way. But the twist is, I think it held me back for a long time because as a writer, I was like, let me show everyone how clever I am. And lo and behold, I ain't that fucking clever. And nobody wants to hear a scene about just all the things I think about comic books or video games or whatever, right? Because it had already been done, because Clerks did it already. So it's, oh, this is just Clerks by some loser, right? I'm talking about the stuff I was writing. And also, it's just not, man, it's very rarely that interesting, you know? And so this scene is actually, there's very much a BCE and CE version of my career after I got over being up my own ass about how clever I was and all the cool, look at me, let me show off a little bit, and got into actually understanding craft and storytelling and making sure, I think you used the word intent earlier. Are my intentions clear in a scene? Are these do these characters stand out? Is there clear characterization? Do you understand who they are, right? Um And I think I have to, I think back and I use literally this movie and that scene as a warning to get my head out of my own ass as a writer. I really wish that magic thumbs up hadn't have shown up there. But
Did you hit that?
no, I don't know how to turn it off.
That's great. I think we
It's
just leave that in, and that's a bit for the
It's coming
entire
up at very
episode.
opportune times as well.
yeah, no, seriously.
But
It's the
dude, like
only
that
thumbs up I
sounds
get.
familiar, like and super relatable. And I expect it's relatable to anybody who's been really doing this for a while, which is the whole sense of like you were inspired by a thing and now you want to like create your own thing and show everybody how clever you are, and then at some point you realize like the truth of it and you just focus more on the actual craft, and maybe getting out of your own way a little bit. I don't know, that sounds
I think very much getting out of my own way. I think the other thing and there's been moments like that. Like I wasn't around for when the Lethal Weapon script came out, but evidently everybody started writing like Shane Black for a minute.
I think
It for
people
sure
still write
happened.
shit.
Sure, but it's less.
Yeah,
Shane Black has so much impacted everybody
for sure.
that you're now 8 generations down. And so it isn't, it's just like the Citizen Kane thing. Everything has been impacted by Citizen Kane, so it's very, very hard to get back to the source. But Pulp Fiction did it too,
Totally.
where everybody was like, "Oh, I can play with cutting and this and that and time," and it's like, "No, dude, stop! You gotta stop! You gotta stop!" There's
Well, and not
very,
only that, everybody wanted to write their version of the dialogue scene where nothing happens, right? Like, and they're like, well, he can do it, so I can do it, and it'll work fine.
but that, I mean, that's Clerks. That's all of
Yeah,
Clerks. There's Again, I love that movie because it's funny and clever and very, very nostalgic. But as a movie, I don't know that it's like a touch point of cinema like something like Jaws, for example.
those are two different worlds, but I don't think you could deny the fact that it was super influential. Like both in terms of, I bet there are so many people who would say the same thing, that it like influenced you to go out with your friends and make something. Just like
A
there
hundred
are so
percent.
many people who saw El Mariachi and were like, "You can make a movie for an action movie for $7,000." You know what I mean? And like,
Well, Robert Rodriguez can, you can't.
Yeah.
so, but like, but my point is, it definitely got so many people thinking about the reality, like about the possibility, right? Of like, oh, like there are scrappy ways to get out there and make my own movies and make my own things happen. And
Agreed. I do think that the sort of back end below the line impact for sure. But I think when you're, the front facing of the actual like movies and the public and my granny in, you know, Milwaukee is not motivated to go out and make a movie after she sees Clerks. She just, thinks it's funny or not. But
sure,
it's like, again, I just look at the impact in the like the forward facing impact maybe wasn't as big. But it is interesting to hear like Clerks, El Mariachi, things like that are so much more, let's say, attainable for a person to get motivated and see those things as opposed to a Jaws or a Star Wars. You're like, well, how do I even start? I don't have a robot or a
yeah,
shark for that matter.
I mean,
Right.
100%.
I think,
Sorry, go ahead, Reggie.
no, I was just saying, I think the power of this is just how, by putting this sort of dialogue on screen, legitimizes like sort of quintessential Gen X geek culture that, 25 years down the road, would just become so ever present. I think that's what's so powerful, that it's just, yeah, I mean, it's written in a certain way that almost feels unreal, but it comes from a very real place. And, I was a little bit younger when this came out. And, you know, when this time came out, a friend and I actually had our own comic strip, and it was the
Love.
most edge lord, like take whatever you thought about Image at the time and multiply it by 10, like decapitations in every panel. Um, so I hear this and I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember 1993. I remember that stage of just diving hard into stuff, way harder, and like wondering, like, where does Wolverine actually go in Canada when he's hiding from, the rest of the X-Men? It's that put on screen that makes you feel legitimized in a way.
That's
It
cool.
it is so real, and it you extrapolate that out to other people and newer writers and whatever, and you're like, yes, you also have to be inspired. You have to see yourself on screen. You have to. It sounds goofy because it's not like nerdy white dudes never had their seat at the table, but it is fascinating. And one of the things I thought about last night as I was rewatching in preparation, as I was like, before I saw this movie, to me, movies were this nebulous thing that just existed outside of me that I was able to access but could never be a part of. This didn't seem like a viable thing that one could do. And this movie, and this is my favorite scene for dork reasons, was exactly that, which is uh, like, Brady, what you're saying, like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can be a part of this. This is wild. This dude did it. All he had was a black and white camera and, you know, a convenience store.
So that's definitely the influence piece in terms of like how it just got everything moving for you. Is there anything craft wise that you feel like has rubbed off on how you actually approach storytelling or anything? Or is there anything like revisiting it where you're like, maybe I should try and do a little bit more of that in my own writing? Or is it
No,
more just kind of this was like a genesis for you?
it's what I referred to earlier. It is the exact opposite. Stop doing that shit.
That's really
Because
funny.
it was, I get threatened once in a while by a mentor of mine who I will not name. Don't say it.
I was
Names.
wondering.
And he reminds me every time I get a little too full of myself. He says, I would like to remind you that I have a script of yours where you spend one entire page of action description on someone eating breakfast. And he said, I have the page physically, and I am going to fucking show it to you if you do not behave yourself. And it is that instinct. And I can't tell you how many writers where I have read their stuff and it's very much that. And I have to say to them and try and be gentle, like, dude, you gotta stop. Just write he eats breakfast. Because we all want to show off and prove how clever we are and how fun, and oh, the roofers and contrary, and we're using clever language and things like that. But it doesn't, and this was the point of Clerks. This all works within that movie because that's what the soul of that movie is. It's two sort of striving dorks. Well, it's one striving dork and one kind of Zen Buddhist master in Randall existing in their day. It's very much a slice of life movie. And in a slice of life movie, you can just talk about slice of life
Sure.
stuff. And
Totally.
again, it was all very new and it was all very special. Um, but yeah, it's really hard to do that. Like, we've seen it, how many times have you heard we've seen it? We've seen this. This happened
Yeah.
already. If I write a movie about giant robots fighting each other, they're gonna be like, dude, there's 7 Transformers movies. What are you doing? It has to be new. It has to evolve. It has to change, right? So this, this really is the earmark of like, don't do that.
It
I'm
is
doing
such an.
it right
Sorry,
now
go
on an
ahead.
edit. I'm rewriting something. I'm doing an edit on a rewrite. And I'm halfway through a scene and I'm like, why are we still talking about this? What is happening? It's over. You're just being clever. Stop it. Stop.
I mean, it is interesting though, dude, because like if you're a newer writer especially if you're a newer writer who's trying to get things going, and maybe even if you're not to some degree, like yes, like audiences tend to respond to things usually that are more original, and certainly we're seeing a lot of that right now. And also like what was the script of mine that broke me in and the first one that I got made? Like the one that is pitched as Die Hard on a bridge and actually like is structured a lot like that, right? And it's kind of I see that happen for so many people where like that's how they get their foot in the doors with something that is a little less original.
But let me argue the semantics of this a little bit, which is all we
Do
have.
it.
Familiarity is good, right? Familiar but new.
Sure. Yeah.
You understand, I mean, even foundationally, I don't want to get all hoity-toity and thumb up my own butt, but it's like the hero's journey works because we sort of understand the movements and mechanics of that. And it makes sense, but we want to see it with a new hero, and we want to see it with a new villain, and we want to see a twist or a different thing or something unexpected or whatever, right? There is nothing new under the sun. We all know that. It is a matter of the execution and how you do it. I mean, I'm not being funny. Last year I sold Die Hard in a building. I'm not joking. So it's I think there is value there, but it is in the doing, right? Call me crazy.
I mean, I think you're a little crazy, but just a little bit.
That's just the
Um,
head injuries.
yeah, man. You already said you had the concussions to prove it, so there you go. Um, Reggie, I'm curious, was there anything that like again, because I think your perspective of like having never seen it in its entirety before is so interesting. Was there anything from like watching it that you picked up that you were like, that's really interesting, and I feel like I could apply that to my own writing? And if the answer is no, that's perfectly valid. I'm just curious.
What I thought was not necessarily new because this is sort of seminal in things you've seen in other places. I think about like the Pulp Fiction Royale with Cheese section. It reminded me a lot of that, having seen that first and multiple times.
Sure.
um
Those were
it's
both 94, I think, too, right?
It wasn't far
I feel
off.
like Clerks was earlier.
Maybe.
No, same year.
Same year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. It just like, I mean, there's definitely a measure of any ingredient you put in a dish, but I think the idea of like sort of colorful wrinkles for characters can make them
Mm.
stand out in a way. Um, sometimes less is more, sometimes more is more, but the idea that you can incorporate something very, very real world, put into a screen, and then have in a clever, comical way, have a real world person sort of blow up that argument. I think that's really what's cool about this.
It is cool.
Excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold, so I'm kind
All
of
good, dude.
Your
excuse me.
voice isn't normally that deep. I get it.
So
Um,
It is not. It is
it's
about a third
interesting.
higher.
It's interesting to hear you say that because I I'm starting and I'm a little slow, obviously, but you're right. This isn't none of that scene, nothing's moving the plot forward. There's no plot. Nothing is moving it forward. We are merely existing with these people and sitting in on this conversation, and it doesn't go anywhere and it doesn't affect anything. And I think often the problem, and I'm realizing this in real time, the problem is adding a scene like that in a movie that does have a plot is extremely problematic.
Sure.
And I think that might be an issue. And it was probably, now I'm going to go read an old script with the page-long description of someone eating breakfast and go, no, I was thumbing over my shoulder, not giving myself a thumbs up there. Um, I'm going to go read that script and wonder, was there a plot? And was there a plot that was being hamstrung by characters having these nonsensical conversations and spending too long eating breakfast?
Dude, it's interesting because like I do tend to agree a scene like that in your typical movie that has an active protagonist, which I typically think is really important. Um, a scene like that is usually a problem, but it's not always, right? Like I remember seeing this interview with James Cameron where he was saying how much he had to fight to leave the scene of like everybody flying in Avatar. And he's like, the audience wants that scene where everybody's flying. Nothing happens. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no there, it's not
Mm-hmm.
plotty. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no arc to the scene, really. It's
Sure.
just them flying. But the audience wants to experience that moment. And because he was James Cameron, he was finally able to win the fight. But like I think he's 100% right about that scene. And so like there is justification for scenes that leave the thread to do something, but I think he was doing it with so much intent, going back to that word, right? Like he knew what he was doing with it.
Yeah, I would be cautious in using things like Avatar as a touchstone. That is an experience, a world, a
Correct. Yeah.
vibe. That is something that exists outside of traditional movie
But it has an
storytelling.
incredibly traditional hero's journey like
Yeah, totally. It's
structure.
Fern
Yeah.
Gully, dude.
Right.
Yes, totally. But it is more than that.
Totally. Yeah.
Nobody's going on the Fern Gully ride at Disneyland. You know what I mean? And none of those movies made what 2 point whatever billion dollars, right? Nobody has the full back piece tattoo. Like Avatar is a very different, very special thing. Um, just like Lord of the Rings happens and everybody's like, it has to be a trilogy. And it's like, but what if it wasn't? What if it didn't have to be a trilogy? What if it was just a movie? So Avatar needs those moments where you go, oh my God, I am a part of this whole thing, and it's blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I think we have to be very, very careful. Just like putting a scene
Correct.
like this, if we put a scene like the Death Star scene in John Wick, you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, you lose the entire momentum of the movie.
If
Yeah.
you put a scene where they're all flying in
Because
uh
I love that you said
paranormal
experience.
activity, no, that would work
Well, but
actually.
you
Never
said
mind.
experience, dude. Like because and I think that's right. Like what's the experience of John Wick? It's like balls to the wall, does not stop action. And if you betray that with the Death Star scene, I don't think you have a movie that spawned four sequels, you know?
Agreed 100%.
So I think that
100%.
that talking about the experience of it is something I've never really done before, but I think it's a really interesting way to like, what is the experience of what you're making here? I think that's kind of cool actually.
I would just say, I think when I say experience, that's a vibe and a whole thing
Mhm.
that is very, very hard to capture. And James Cameron, obviously being one just all
James
time, one
Cameron.
of my absolute favorites. Yes, one of my absolute favorites. I mean, just banger after banger with that guy.
I'm just going to assume Reggie's on the same page with us because he writes similar stuff. But if you hate James Cameron, you can say so.
Blasphemy.
Not at all. Not at all.
It's
I
I
have
would
zero negative
actually,
hatred for James Cameron.
this would be an interesting conversation, is if you could find someone who like virulently hated James Cameron, his movies. I mean, I don't know him as a person. I'm sure he's lovely, but and you could just hear that person out, like true hot take. I hate James Cameron movies, and you go, I would love to hear this, sir. Like, I actually understand people who don't like, because I also love Mallrats. I think Mallrats is a better movie than Clerks. Um, but this was, for the sake of the YouTube series, it was this scene, right?
Yeah.
But I understand. I love, 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 love Kevin Smith's Jersey trilogy and all that stuff. I deeply, deeply foundational movies for me. Like Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, I think just maybe better trilogy than Lord of the Rings. I don't know. Who can tell? But
That is a hot take. That is
That's a
an
hot take.
entirely different episode.
but imagine all the emails I would be getting if I gave people my email address. But
It's going to appear right there, right now,
just
everybody.
right under the thumbs up, it's so I love that stuff, but it is very specific. Very, very, very specific. You know what I mean? And I understand when people say, I don't like it or I don't get it fully. Because
Yeah.
I think if you're not a specific kind of dork, that stuff doesn't hit the same way. It doesn't crawl inside your heart and, you know, live.
Dalan, I will sort of jump on your train for a bit because it can be like cilantro. Like it goes in certain dishes and certain stuff, keep it away from it. Um, and to your point, I do feel like, especially with a lot of the mainstream IP driven material that from the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of it is like, hey, look how clever we are. We're not quite breaking the fourth wall, but we almost are. And it sort of takes the wind out of the sails of
Mhm.
whatever stakes they're making. So I know exactly. I know the sentiment that you're speaking to, and that's one thing that does bother me. But I mean, I think with, like you were saying, like you're getting at with Clerks, I mean, that is the dish though. The dish has cilantro. This is the vibe, is like these are everyday guys that were, this isn't a big otherworldly experience. This is very, very down to earth slacker guys that do everyday stuff just like me, and let's make it fun and funny.
No, it's very cilantro forward to abuse this analogy.
Yeah,
And I think
that's going to be your new t-shirt line, Reggie, is cilantro forward.
All right, I'll take it.
it is interesting to hear you say that too, where you are reminded like these are likely, and I don't remember all the stories. I haven't heard the interviews in a long time, but like I would bet money these are conversations that Kevin Smith had with probably those guys. Like, and he was just like, "Hey, let's all be in a movie," because that's what we all did when we were younger. Is you get your friends and you're like, "Let's either create a fantasy of what we wish we were doing or to show people what we were doing." And it's certainly more prevalent in the world of YouTube and having camera phones and stuff like that, as opposed to having to, scrape up money for 16 millimeter black and white film
Right.
in 90, early 90s, you know, which I think made it, that's why it was such a seismic shift, is we just hadn't seen any of that stuff before.
For sure. Um, we're running longish here, and I really want to make time, if I can, for that conversation that we said we were going to have, which was sparked by me saying we were going to read the script for it, and like kind of discuss it as we were reading the script. And you're like, no, we need to watch the scene. And you had a
Hmm.
very specific reason for saying why. So I think so. I wouldn't say it was a all-out debate because I didn't wholly disagree with you, but it was a it was a fascinating conversation. We're like, let's table this and talk about this as part of it. So why don't you give your take on that? Like why it goes back to your breakfast thing, right? Your
Well,
page
Nate,
of breakfast.
my question to you is, what the fuck did I say?
Okay. So I mean, I if I let me see if I can remember it. Like basically what you said was that there's nothing that we're going to learn from reading the script that we can't learn, or nothing important that we can learn from reading the script that we can't learn by watching that scene. And I kind of disagreed with that. And I think I'm looking at it from a different perspective than you are a little bit. Um, but I don't completely disagree with that because at the end of the day, you know, the storytelling is what winds up on screen, and there's so much that can be learned from that. And that's also the thing that inspired us all in the first place was what we saw, not what we read.
So I vaguely remember this conversation. I think part of it is probably my argument that I don't know how much craft you are going to learn by just looking at pages of a script. I'm assuming that everybody who is trying to write scripts has at least read one script. Um, and so I don't know how much that's going to help unless you are maybe showing it at the same time as what shows up on screen. But again, with a scene like this that's so dialogue heavy, my guess is it's probably mostly transcription at that point, or vice versa, right? They
Right.
are just the characters on screen are just saying the things written on the page, and if you're looking at the page, it's just what the people said on screen.
Especially for a
I,
scene like this, it's much less interesting.
100%. And that's, I think, the super dialogue heavy scene is why maybe I mentioned that if I did indeed say this. You could have said anything, and I don't remember. But I think actually there might be some value, right? Which is if you look at like the contractor conversation piece that Randall does, where he talks about the roofers and plumbers and things like that. I will bet that that is such heavy, difficult, um, like obstacle course level language. Randall's having a hard time getting it out in a way. The part where we paused and I argued that this is very, very difficult language and does not sound like human beings talking. It probably looks great on the page, but when you realize,
It doesn't look that great on the page. I
there you
read
go.
it. Yeah.
There you go.
So
So it's interesting where things like that don't necessarily translate to the easiest, most natural speech, right?
hmm.
And you can even throw back to, Reggie, I'll use your examples when you talk about fantasy movies or like Lord of the Rings and, referencing like the prithys and forsooths. That still sounds natural with good actors in the right setting, right? It still delivers like people talking. Um, Anthony Hopkins in the Thor movies does not feel out of place because he's speaking ye olde English, um, or Norse, I guess. But this stuff feels very, I don't want to say clumsy, but how damn it.
You- It's
But man,
amazing.
Doesn't
that's
work for
that
me.
is that is heavy dialogue. And not heavy like emotional. And I think if you look at other, let's call it clever writing, when you look at Aaron Sorkin, when you look at like Social Network or The West Wing, or when you look at Armando Iannucci in some of the stuff that he did in The Thick of It or Veep, like that very sort of bantery, clever, rhythmic, yet staccato, that kind of dialogue, man, on the page, that stuff looks wild.
I think it's cool to read it on the page but it's for a similar reason to like why I prefer to read books as opposed to listen to audiobooks. And it's because I have always been this way. Like my brain just goes off in tangents and I stop and I'm like, and I start thinking about certain things, right? And so like if there's like
Mm,
really cool dialogue on the page, I'm likely to be sparked by it, think about things, go back and reread it a couple times, but
mm.
you can't simulate that while watching it in the same way, in my opinion.
Sure, sure.
And so I feel like you make new connections in the brain as a result of that, or at least I do.
You are
Um,
probably right.
but I'm curious, do you feel like you're aligned with the advice that's often given that a writer who wants to write screenplays should read a bunch of them, or do you think you're one of the people who thinks you can just read a couple and then watch a shitload of movies and have the same experience?
I mean, you can't, not to be pedantic, but you can't have the same experience doing two different things. I think both approaches are valuable. I think everybody is going to respond differently and is going to get different things from different approaches, right? And I'm not just trying to do like therapy speak. Um, I think it is important to read some scripts to understand how the craftsmanship works, right? How people are navigating through a scene, how people are breaking up dialogue with a little bit of action description to make the read, how people are actually staggering the words to control the reader, to control the eye, um, to make sure that people are reading it in the way it's intended and you are eliciting a response, a mental response or a mental picture from people that matches what you are trying to convey, right? That's very difficult, I think. I think that part is very important. I think also seeing the way it shows up on screen is equally as important because that is ultimately the goal, right? But you have to get through one to get to the other. It's like if you're going to be an architect, you have to look at blueprints, but you also have to go into some houses, you know? Um, I think both have tremendous value and each are going to be weighted differently for the different people because everyone's
That makes
brain is
sense.
going to work very differently. I don't read a ton of scripts these days
Same.
unless there is something truly profound that I want to, like, I was halfway through Challengers and stopped and was like, I need to read this motherfucker because this is killing me. And I just was like, at Page Turner.
Killing you and like you
I
enjoyed
loved it. I loved
that
it.
was my favorite movie of last year.
It's so the just it there was something about it that just grabbed me and
Yeah.
was like, you need to read this. So I pulled the script, I got mailed the script. And I pulled that and got to read it and was just like, it's brilliant. Just
I
brilliant
mean,
writing.
what's crazy is that was
Uh,
his first fucking screenplay, but like he was a super successful playwright beforehand.
mhm.
Um, so like, but it's just like amazing. Like
Yeah.
anyway,
I
um,
truly, 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 truly masterful.
but I used to read a shit ton of scripts, and I do believe that that's important as you're learning the craft personally. It certainly helped me, but I'm also the same way where I really don't read too much these days unless it's a friend who's like, "Hey, can you give me feedback?" Or now with this like kind of spot the pro thing that we've been doing, which has been really fun. But like I do think now I probably gain more from watching movies, but at some point it was really important. Reggie, did you have other questions that you wanted to ask Dalen before we wrap up here?
Yeah, why not?
What was that? What was that look?
I did not expect to have questions asked. I didn't know that I was worth asking questions of, but I'll take
I
it.
mean,
I
you're
love answering
kind of a
things.
big deal now, Dalen. It might surprise you.
Yeah,
But the last
yeah.
few years have been good to you.
Yes, you are right. I have been very, very blessed the last few years, but I still, yeah, I still treat this very much like a job and like I work hard and I do not want to sit back and be like, well, let me tell you guys, I have this all figured out. Because, I'm still learning a ton and I'm still figuring this out and trying to get better and stuff like that. But yeah, I have a hard time recognizing maybe my own successes, I guess.
That's
Sometimes.
probably healthy. And also, how boring would it be to reach a point where you don't feel like you can get any better?
Have you talked to so many people in this world? Anyway, yes, Reggie, please go on.
Well, on that tip, can you talk about an example of something you wrote that you felt worked, but felt like different, maybe independent of any direction, performance issues that didn't work the way you thought it would after it was produced?
Man, what a great question. I'm going to harken you back to our old friend Iron Sky 2. There were a couple of jokes in the movie that when I wrote them, I was just absolutely delighted with myself, and I thought I was the funniest person on the planet. And on screen, for whatever reasons, as they made it through the actors and the director and the editing or whatever, they don't work, or they fall flat, or the inflection point is in the wrong spot in the, line. And I'm like, man, that just nobody thought that was funny, huh?
Mm.
And there is, and I'm not blaming anybody, right? You drop the blueprints for the house and you hand it over to the general contractor. And if where you put the door like faces out on a giant rock, he's like, yeah, man, I got to move the door 2 feet to the left. I don't know what to fucking tell you. And then, and it's all well and good for me to be sitting in my office. Don't do the thumbs up thing. It's good for me to be sitting in my office, like doing the dialogue to myself. And I'm like, man, this thing is going to crush. And in real life, it just doesn't. I mean, that's probably me. That's probably my fault. And then there's one other, and this is just slightly to the left of what you're saying, but there was a gag that I did in Falcon Winter Soldier that I guess people picked up on, and like big Disney put it up as a meme on their Instagram, and people loved it and liked and blah blah blah. And someone made me a poster of it, which is like the coolest thing that's ever happened. And I've been asked about that joke a couple of times, that bit over, the years. And I'm always like, yeah, but that's not the one I thought was funny. Because there's another bit that I thought was way funnier that nobody has mentioned. It feels like a throwaway. I don't
That's so
think the
interesting.
actors even it was so interesting, because every time I think about it and every time I have to answer this question, I'm like, but what about that bit? What about that bit? And it reminds me also all the time is in the imitable wisdom of Jeff Bridges and the Big Lebowski. Well, that's just like your opinion, man. So I have to remember that the stuff I think is just absolute knee slapper, hands down, double fire emoji, legendary stuff, isn't necessary. You don't control it once it leaves you. And everybody gets to have their own experience with stuff. And it reminds me constantly to be open to, and this goes for life, the universe, and everything, right? You might be wrong. It doesn't matter how certain you are. You might be wrong.
Right.
So who knows? I mean, comedy is subjective. Everyone who doesn't laugh at that one joke, I'm like, you guys are dumb. But, but yes, that's a good question.
That's really funny.
And what are you gonna do? What are you gonna fucking do about it? Except complain to people on YouTube sometimes.
I haven't come up with many smart analogies about writing in my life, but I came up with one after Aftermath came out that I think is really useful, which is writing a screenplay is a lot like having a kid and raising a kid. Like you have control for a while, and but they're going to go off and become their own person someday. And there's very little that you can do about that. And you just hope that you did enough early on that they do a few things that make you proud. They're definitely going to do some things that you don't approve of. But at the end of the day, you hope you feel pretty good about how they turned out, right? And like I think that's about what you can hope for as a screenwriter. Like because there's so many people involved for so many reasons and there's so many weird things that can happen along the way, you know? And so you hope it works out and you do your
It's
best.
an it's an interesting point. I was talking to a friend who wrote a fairly big movie not too long ago, and after the premiere, I saw him and I was like, "How you feeling, man?" And he was like somewhere between apoplectic and furious. He was like, "Well, it's not the movie I would have made." And I was like, "Bro, and like what's the alternative? Nothing's ever going to be exactly the way you want it to be. Show me the one element of your life where everything is exactly the way you want. I don't like the legs on that table. What am I going to do? I'm going to replace them with different legs, or I'm just going to get used to it. Stop it." And I think, for me at least, and it took me, I don't want to say it took me a while to get there because it took me a while to get a movie made. And by the time I got a movie made, I was like, yeah, this is going to be the thing that it is, right? I don't have an expectation because that's like the, parent of all disappointment. I'm excited to see what this becomes. It could be completely different than what I envisioned. But that's what being a writer, director, producer is about, and doing like a black tank top kung fu movie in your backyard in 1990. Like, because this is such a massively collaborative project, and I think we all owe it to ourselves and the project and the whatever to be like creatively sort of, what's the opposite of bankrupt? Like creatively like honest.
Flush with, I don't know,
Yeah,
Solvent.
right. But like to be
solvents. There it is. That's the right word.
yeah, to be creatively, so that's actually a great term. Thank you. So to be
That's
creatively
your second
solvent,
t-shirt.
and if creatively solvent, this is how you're going to actually make all your money is on merchandising. So I think to be creatively solvent, to steal this term, and I'll copyright it myself now, and stand up for what you think. Hey, look, this is there for this reason. Here is my intention. But one of the things that I have stood behind from very early on is, I say this to producers, studio executives, directors. My job is to make the best version of the movie y'all are going to make. Because the reality is I am not making that movie. Straight up. If I'm there on set, I'm doing rewrites to solve the problems that come up. Any of that. Happy to do it. I love it. I will do my best. But I'm not going to try and impose my bullshit or my version of something on a bunch of other people because everyone has to be on board in order to create the best version of that. Because imagine whatever else we do in life, if you know better, right? Let's pretend I'm a plumber. Let's just to go back to that scene.
Yeah. Nice callback. That's
And
good.
I'm like, okay, so the sink's right here. I'm going to put the toilet right here. There's going to be some pipes in the ground. And they're like, nope, I need you to put the toilet on the wall. And you go, yeah, it's not where toilets go, man. I can't put the toilet on the wall. Right. You know what I mean? If it's like a situation like that, that's different. You got to get them to the point where they're cool with the toilet on the floor. But if they want the sink and the toilet to like switch places, and that's just dealer's choice, just set everything up the best you can. Like, do everything. This is a terrible analogy, and I hope you edit it because it really falls apart under any sort of scrutiny. But
You just have to have confidence in it, man. Just don't pretend it's a perfect analogy. And
that's my problem. I had supreme confidence until I said it, and then I
Mhm.
realized it was absolutely preposterous. But it was, I think what it is it is important to remember that our job is not to just bend over and accept whatever and just listen to everybody else, but it is ultimately a bunch of people are making this movie, and we have to get everybody on board with whatever these concepts and ideas are. And, you know, unless you're Galileo or whatever, and you're like, no, guys, I promise you the earth revolves around the sun. I have this mathematics ready. Like, unless you're that guy and you are for sure 100% right, maybe somebody else is right. And maybe you should figure out the third way that everyone likes or something like that. And I think that's been tremendously valuable for me to remember is, they say, you have to, like, don't be afraid to kill your babies or whatever the
Sure.
old saying is, right? Because people give you a note to cut a scene that you love. And I've had this conversation a lot with people over the last few months where they're like, well, what do you do when someone gives you a note and it means you have to cut a scene that you love? I'm like, write another scene that you love. What are you talking about? There's only one. It's like if you have five, it's like if you're an octopus and you've laid a clutch of 70 million eggs. Just whatever. A shark ate 30 of them. I don't know. There's 69 million left. I got to stop with the
No,
analogies,
this is
boys.
good. We brought it from Clerks to Finding Nemo, and we're doing great.
Was there
So
an octopus in that movie?
no, I'm talking about the
Boy,
eggs and eating
I'm
all the eggs.
joking. I'm joking.
No, this is awesome. This is very much everything that I was hoping would kind of come out of a conversation spawned by a single scene in a movie. So I really appreciate it. We're running a little long here, so to be respectful of your time, guys.
You got a lot of editing to do, pal.
I do have a little bit of editing to do. That's true. But this is going to be great. People are going to appreciate this. I can tell. Reggie, where can people find you? And is there anything that you want to shout out or promote right now?
You can find me on Instagram. I am, what is my handle there? It is just underscore Reggie underscore official. I have a short film playing in the Michaud Fest on the 24th
Awesome.
in Baltimore City, which is
That you wrote or directed, or both?
both.
Hey,
Both.
congratulations.
Thank you. I am also filming a very black tank top in the backyard-esque martial arts film at the end of the
My
month
man.
that
My
I'm
man.
super excited about.
Yes. Do you use nunchucks?
No nunchucks.
Great.
I'm ready.
Dalan, same question. I know you're not on
What?
social media or anything, but anything you want to shout out or promote or
Just
whatnot?
people being nice to each other.
That's pretty good. We'll take that. All right, everybody, be nice to each other. And with that, thanks so much, guys. This was awesome. I really appreciate your time.
If you want to see more from one scene, you should definitely hit those like, subscribe, and hype buttons. But even better, you can become a part of this community by commenting below with your own thoughts and takeaways. And if you're interested in being part of a future episode, head on over to my website where you can find out more details. The link's in the description below, and if it's still active, that means I plan to make more of these. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one.